Hello and welcome to this episode of TF. It's a free one.
It's the free
one.
I
preempted Milo's awful habits of doing. I wish he was back on vacation.
What you did really was you teed me up for.
And I'm here in studio with Milo and Hussein. We have Alice and joining us, very special guests from very far away in a room that appears to be full of computer detritus, like a hacker's bedroom from the 1990s. It is Cory Doctorow and Rebecca Giblin, the authors of Chokepoint Capitalism. Cory, returning champion. Rebecca, first-time challenger. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here. And we are dialing in from the 1990s from a hacker's bedroom. So
Two of them enter, only one of them may leave.
Yeah,
will
right.
Cory retain his champion's belt, or will Rebecca, the challenger, take it off him?
Or will Rebecca win the champion's belt that gets you access to the free well drinks and
free filter coffee, assorted danishes in the Trashfuture lounge?
Yeah,
don't even challenge me like that. Like, it was very, very close last night to ending up in an arm wrestling tournament in Soho House. So anything can happen.
I mean, I
to
love.
be fair, that's got to be the easiest arm wrestling tournament in history.
how snapping elbows
they got in there.
Right. Yeah, Lovies have got notoriously skinny arms.
I had it, but they're all talk. They're back off.
Oh yeah, I bet.
I really love this new remake of Over the Top, where Sylvester Stallone, when he turns his cap backwards, it does say Supreme on both sides. But no, we are going to be talking to Over the Top, the arm wrestling movie. You don't know Over the... God damn it. All Philistines. However, we are going to be talking...
the First World War was solved by arm wrestling?
We are going to be talking to Cory and Rebecca about their new book, which is all about copyright and how these kinds of things that are... These legal principles can be used and abused to suck away the power and revenue of creators of all stripes by middlemen who suck and often promote NFTs.
Does this mean that we're going to have to stop doing the patent pending joke that we like to do now?
Cory, does that mean we're going to have to stop doing that joke if we do this
Rebecca's
episode?
Rebecca's the law professor. I think this is one for her.
Well, I actually think you made the book sound way more boring than it actually is, which was not a huge thing to start this off on.
I feel like we're establishing quite an adversarial relationship.
I don't want to read it after the introduction that it got. The book is about all of these grifts, right? Like the fact that we've got these big businesses that have captured creative labor markets from everything from music, recording, streaming, live performance, ticketing, music publishing, books, like physical, audio, even Hollywood talent agencies, and like so many other different areas. But they're all playing from the same playbook. And they're all pretending they're not doing it. So we get into all of those stories. We persuade you. The problem is not that there's not enough copyright. It's not that artists are not working hard enough. It's that we've got these huge businesses who are creating these hourglass-shaped markets where they get to have audiences at one side, creators at the other, and themselves like squatting predatorily at the neck. And then we don't stop there, though. Like, we just really, violently did not want to write yet another one of those Chapter 11 books where you've got, 10 chapters talking about how shit everything is. And then, oh, look, we're out of time, but here's some hand-wavy stuff, vote harder at the end. So the whole second half of the book is well, sure, they're creating these choke points, but here are a whole bunch of really detailed, hopeful things that we could do about how we widen them out.
A Chapter 11 book actually sounds like a lot of the books we have on this show where you go bankrupt at the end because it doesn't sell very well. Which I'm sure will not be the fate of this book.
Now, to be clear,
Please don't arm wrestle us.
We mean the books we read to make fun of, not the books we interview the authors of. We're talking books, books written by Tory MPs.
Great moments in Trashfuture diplomacy continues. It just rolls on. The charm offensive just continues.
Of course, it wouldn't be the show if I didn't pick a startup to talk about. Also, British listeners may be wondering, hey, Britain seems to be imploding. Are you going to talk about that? And the answer was, we did on the previous episode and we will on the next episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in the next week where a decade has happened.
Yeah, exactly. where we're talking about we're talking gilts. We're
How
talking
much will
pensions.
Cory and Rebecca's book cost in pounds? No idea. Absolutely none.
It's that famous Einstein quote. I don't know what this week's podcast will be recorded with, but next week's podcast will be recorded with sticks and stones.
Yeah,
that's right. You drum the you make some indents in the stick with the stone, and then you feed that into a computer made of like reeds and stuff. That's where we're going in the UK.
I've been
Stone
thinking
technology.
that the studio has been made of more wet leaves than last time.
Recording the podcast directly into the mouth of a pelican who goes, "It's a living."
But the podcast, the startup today, I'll tell you right now, it's been invested in by Andreessen Horowitz, and it's called
The guy who wrote Stormbreaker.
It's called Arpeggi.
Just for me, that one. Arpeggi.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw it to our guest first. Rebecca, having never been on the show, you get first guess. Arpeggi, what do you think it does?
Look, all I can think about now is pelicans, but
Warmer.
okay. Look, Arpeggi for sure. It's a new dishwasher technology, but it's on the blockchain, and dwarves are involved in some way, just to make it smarter.
So you do have the blockchain element correct, but I'm afraid that's the only correct element. Cory, please take us home.
That they're procedurally generating every 4-bar phrase in a 12 note or in an 8-note scale, and then they register each one of them as an NFT and claim that means they now own the copyright to all conceivable melodies.
Oh, you are
and they
so
extract
close.
rank
Oh my
from
God.
people.
Yeah, Arpeggi is saying, look, we all hate polyphony because you hear polyphony and you're like, there's too many notes at once. How am I going to know what all those notes are? So you feed in chords to Arpeggi and then it plays each note individually and then it's on the blockchain somehow.
Again, Cory has gotten it very, very so close.
Well, if you can't copyright or purport to copyright individual notes or chords, it's got to be like pieces of music, right? Like compositions.
I think Alice has got it, I'm afraid.
Can't copyright chord progressions, famously.
If your songs aren't earning for you on the blockchain, what are you even doing in the music industry?
That's right. I was going to go to Hussein next, I'm afraid, but Alice pipped you to the post.
Yeah, mine was also just like a completely irrelevant, although could be quite fun idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to hear it? Okay, welcome to the pit zone. If Mark Andreessen is listening to, what if you had a gig economy service where you where a guy would just show up and like read sections of the Gulag
Archipelago.
That's right. Because I realized that, oh shit, they sort of sound similar, but they don't. And also I don't know how to pronounce.
Solzhenitsyn as a service.
Gig economy, but it's a literal gig.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Arpeggi is called your place to make music, because the one thing that you all missed, but I'm not going to hold this against you, is that it's a kind of crappy, stripped down version of Ableton that's blockchain enabled. So it's a digital audio workstation.
Next Cloghead's album made exclusively on Arpeggi.
Where it says it's a free in-browser, so you know it's good if it's an in-browser digital audio workstation, powered by the blockchain, so that whenever you make some kind of sound, if you're presumably if the first person to make it, it will be you will have an on-chain attribution that you made that sound.
A sort of imperative towards quite harsh industrial noise music here. If the only way you can make money off of it is if it's a sound no one's ever made before.
Well,
I'm intrigued here.
There's a kind of Hellraiser flavor to that, right? I'm gonna evoke sounds from you that no human ears have heard before. But
many British sex noises.
Yeah.
This is like, so when I was a baby writer, I would meet these grifters who would give writing advice, and they would say things like, as soon as you write it, you must put it in an envelope and FedEx it to yourself, but never open it. And that way, when someone steals your precious idea, you can prove, because everyone knows that you can't counterfeit a FedEx envelope. And this is as if they were selling you the FedEx envelopes, right? You just take all of that and add a $100 per FedEx envelope price tag to mint the FedEx envelope.
I just think this is hopelessly derivative by Andreessen again, because I actually delivered a paper in London at a conference called Geeky in about 2017 that was entirely in the form of dystopic short fiction. And the first sentence sort of began, the person, they're working in the studio, they're making the music, and they're doing it on a hover piano which is how you know it's the future. And it was exactly this, right? You had to put all of your music through this. Like what happens in a world where you've got perfect copyright enforcement? You've got to put all your new compositions through this machine, and then the computer says yes or no, which is actually something George Harrison legit asked for in the 70s after he was found to have unconsciously infringed My Sweet Lord. He was just like, what I want is a computer that will do exactly that. I think you need to think this through a little bit further.
Mailed that idea to yourself in an envelope because
you know the funny thing is, right, is we all remember the show Silicon Valley. That was the initial purpose of the company that Silicon Valley is about, is for musicians to play their songs into this recording thing, and then it would compress the file and check it to see if it was violating copyright.
I feel like this can get grimmer, right?
Turn it in with the music.
Yeah. We've got to go in the opposite direction. We've got to like discipline and punish here. We have to have the hover piano that like gives you a little shock anytime you play something that's copyrighted.
You know, I actually consulted on the final season of Silicon Valley, and if only I'd had you guys in the writer's room with me, we could have had the shocking disciplinary technology piano.
We could have done. Well, what this has made me think of is a friend of mine who was talking to me about Animal Crossing, and she was saying that in Animal Crossing, I've never played it, there's a dynamic where you can...
I'm sure you haven't played it, Milo.
Yeah,
this game I was just hearing about Animal Crossing that you played.
Because I'm a red-blooded man.
Yeah.
I don't even know what an Animal Crossing is. And but she was saying you could compose a theme tune for your Animal Crossing island.
She was saying that you can compose a theme tune.
She was saying that, yeah. And what she said to me was, the mechanic kind of sucks though, because they only give you 12 notes. And I was like, well, I hate to break this to you.
Where's the J?
Yeah, we're going to invent the 13th note. That's the new startup.
So that's the brown note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, right, so when we say sounds, what we mean is like tracks or snippets, and it's been invested in not just by Andreessen Horowitz, but by Steve Aoki, the Disco Fries, and other various
the Disco Fries,
American-style EDM
Was
people.
that one of the things they tried to rename French fries after 9/11?
No, it was actually, it was in the backlash to the disco backlash. So how does it work? This is from their FAQs, because again, the hint is, if you're looking for a startup to say something stupid, look at what cues they think are FA.
This would not be my FAQ. My cue that I would A them is, does it work?
Oh, I'm sure it does. With these things, I'm sure they work technically. It's just that with blockchain, companies, there's always this massive set of social assumptions about how this will then integrate with wider society that they just never really think through. But so they say, how does it work? Over the years, music has become increasingly single player. Arpeggi's goal is
Amazing. I'm sorry, what?
We want musical Verdansk. Let's go.
What if multiple people were doing music at the same time? That'd be interesting. Why don't we do that?
We've invented the orchestra.
Yeah, anyway, single player music, let's go.
Arpeggi's goal is to automate the trust in digital collaboration so artists can be more connected than ever. And again, like, the idea of doing this is with some kind of an ownership claim on any melody you could possibly make, so that it's just more transactional, which all of these weird crypto people seems to think is the same thing as more connected and trusting.
Yeah, because I think there would have been so much more trust, actually, Cory, when we were writing this book together. Right, because that was really one of the big challenges. You know, we're working on this. You know, we're writing in each other's sentences. If only that had been on the blockchain.
We needed more tokens, is what she's saying, right? If every time I fixed a typo, I got a little cookie that fell out of my browser and into my wallet.
I just would have trusted that a lot more.
And the people who stole all the things in my wallets would have gotten all those cookies, and think of all the good they could have done.
I'm just intrigued by the idea that copyright is about trust here. That's interesting to me.
But I'm intrigued by the idea that this is about copyright, right? Because
I'll tell you the next paragraph is when they go into it. They say Arpeggi allows musicians to share their music for reuse and attribution when their sound is used. In the traditional music industry, i.e. the one that doesn't involve an append-only database for Squares,
where they're all doing like big band music.
Well, look, you can append you can append or take away from databases in the traditional music industry. Compliantly using someone else's song or sound requires payment and legal clearance, but with Arpeggi, any sound you hear is yours to create with. Now, it goes back to one of these things where a lot of the NFT people start with they look at the traditional music industry, for example, and they'll say, wow, this sucks. But then their answer is just more transactions, which seems odd.
Yeah, I mean, it's Bizarro World Creative Commons, right? It's Creative Commons, except that it just sets up these constant token flows every time you play a note. And so, like, you have to think to yourself, like, I was in this solo and I was going to do 2 bars of that song I like, but I figured that the price would be a little too high. I'm only going to do 1 bar.
So to be clear, it's more like songs and snippets. So, but
Right.
It means if you want to remix someone else's song or use a snippet in your song, then you can pay them. But the Cory, what you bring up is probably like not far from the truth, because what if you just make a song on chain that's mostly similar to someone else's with prior attribution? You may now have to pay them for the privilege using, again, whatever fake currency that they invent. And probably becomes wildly speculative.
Yeah, like the British pound, for example.
Yeah. Oh God, you got it. I wouldn't even want to touch that shit coin.
Have I got
I mean,
news
they
for you
had
if
to
you're
recall
listening?
all of those coins so that they could put Charles's face on them. No wonder there's a currency crisis.
That's right.
So they call this we'll move off the Arpeggi in a moment, but they call this the Audio Relationship Protocol, or ARP, if you get what they did there. When a song is made with Arpeggi, the song is registered back into the protocol with full audio and authorship information, which includes the creator of the song and also all references to the sounds the song used, creating new connections between the song authors and sample contributors of that song, sample contributors to those songs, etc. So imagine if we could just perfectly attribute everything and separate it all with a transaction for the benefit of the listener. Both Rebecca and Cory are shaking their heads.
It's just like making music, like it just makes it sound really boring. Like that's kind of
the secret ingredient of pop music, of all music, is theft. But and you want to take that away, that tool away from artists?
No, what they want to take away is the joy, right? Like, have you ever written a song with someone? I've done it literally once, right? But it's like super fun and it's collaborative. You're trying different things out. You're playing. Well, this is how we were doing it. Like, how joyless would it be to be just like, well, I did that bit. Let's register that. And then you put that bit in. Let's just stop for a sec. Record all the paperwork. No.
it seems like another example of just like crypto people who just have no idea how to exist in like normal society. So like they're sort of like how they kind of interpret the way that people even like stuff like ARP, or there's just the line about like using like digital trust and like connecting musicians to each other using the blockchain. And it's just kind of like, do you know people in real life? Like, do you have friends who aren't like part of the crypto community? And like, I can imagine in a lot of cases, based on my very limited interactions with crypto people, that perhaps they don't.
All of these people's favorite band is Imagine Dragons, and ironically, that is the only music you could create using this platform.
Can I recommend some actual good things for people who want to understand how this stuff really does work? So the first is a graphic novel by James Boyle and Jennifer Jenkins, who run the Duke Center for the Public Domain. That's a history of music and copyright called Theft: A History of Music. Alice, you don't know how right you are. Like, it is an amazing law primer on the history of music and copyright. It's absolutely fantastic. There's a short story by Spider Robinson that won the Hugo Award called Melancholy Elephants. That's basically Paul McCartney's widow begging a senator not to extend copyright because she realizes that all the melodies have now exist, and if we just keep extending copyright, no one will be able to make them again. Those are both like 2 actual good resources for people who want to understand why this is dumb.
Yeah, and that story's available freely online.
Yeah,
and that's
it's
actually,
Creative
that was
Commons
the
licensed.
inspo for my dystopic short fiction.
And Spider needs your help. His finances are on the rocks. So if you, he's got a Patreon. So
the story sounds really interesting. I'm going to read it like after we finish the recording. But I was just thinking about this while we were talking, just like the idea of like making something. And just like the process of making things, and anyone who's like sort of, and I'm sure like, from what I read of like the article and also what I will read of the book, you cover this, where the process of actually like making something often does involve like imitation, repetition, and like the way we get new stuff is by trying to learn how like the old stuff is sort of made, and and so on. And it
100%.
sort of feels like these technologies and these kind of like, especially these very obtuse technologies that reduce everything to transactional measures, also sort of ignore just like the actual how the creative process actually works. Because again, like for people in this room, and I guess like most of the listeners as well, it's fairly obvious, like blockchain is not a creative enterprise in spite of how much they would like to present themselves as being like, the creative element of, of the internet. Like, it clearly isn't. And like, so what you end up, and I don't know, like, to me, every time they kind of come up with like their fucking like good projects or like, you know, interesting projects and stuff that they spam your Twitter feed with, it all just feels as if like you're trying to present yourself as being kooky and creative, but you're just like very bad salespeople.
Yeah. I mean, and a third resource that you just made me recall. Jonathan Lethem wrote this incredible essay in Harper's called "The Ecstasy of Influence," that is also open access. And spoiler alert: after this incredibly well-argued essay about how everything that you do is made of the things that you love, he reveals that every sentence in the essay comes from someone else's essay, and it's very, very good.
Eventually, podcasting will reach a point where all of the riffs have been done.
Yeah.
You know, what if an Italian guy was X nationality? We'll have gone through all of it.
Yeah, we'll have done Sengoku Trump and everything.
I reach for my drops and I find that all of the buttons have been removed.
I mean, I can certainly imagine like sometime in the near future an AI, like some company will try like create an AI system where it'll be like, what if you could combine your favorite hosts from your different podcasts and put them together and it sounds seamless.
Yeah.
In which case we'll sort of like have Riley, Nick Mullen, the woman
the McElroy brothers.
Yeah, what if Justin Rosniak was on every episode of this show?
Mark Maron, and like that woman who does Call Her Daddy.
Yeah,
all in one room.
Riley has
fun.
been replaced by the voice of James Earl Jones because that's now like AI.
So I want to move on to talking about this, talking about the book, but I want to do that via another Andreessen Horowitz thing, which I think is very interesting. Because Andreessen Horowitz,
everything you do is made of what you love, and what you love is Andreessen Horowitz pitches.
That's absolutely true. Andreessen Horowitz pitches in books written by Tory MPs.
And every time you bring them up, I'm thinking about the Alex Rider series.
Yeah, so.
Not a lot of people read the Andreessen Horowitz stuff, but everyone who does starts a podcast.
So Andreessen Horowitz has looked at one of the problems of copyright attribution in NFTs. Right, and they have come up with.
I know this one.
Oh, so you know about the "Can't Be Evil" license, Cory and Rebecca? You're doing again the same gesture of head in hands every time I talk about something Andreessen Horowitz does. And
Rebecca and Cory have actually choreographed this.
No, this is a special NFT to spare. We've been on the road for like a week, 10 days now, and done a bunch of events and a bunch of interviews, and NFTs come out. And we were really polite about it at the start, and now it's just a despair collapse.
I mean, as I'm at pains to note, 98% of all conversations involving blockchain are non-consensual.
So
that's very true.
So then this is just, I think, a way in, right? Because what they've done is they've tried to take a Creative Commons license and then reinterpret it for a blockchain. And the reason I think this is interesting is because they have once again, they're trying to take a social problem, and that's the problem that we're going to be exploring, the social problem of copyright, and solve it with a bunch of technical methods of issuing and exchanging attributions and licensed uses of things more exactly.
Sexy.
Yeah, and I think that what makes that interesting to me, right, is they say, okay, this is what they say on their pitch, is many people buy NFTs to own an avatar, an artwork, or any number of other creative outputs. But the reality is they usually can't be sure of what they're getting, as it's typically stored off-chain. And so, you may think that you've bought you may think that you've purchased an ape,
an exquisite ape. Yeah. But
I thought this ape was doing the pussy eating gesture, but actually it's doing the masturbating gesture.
Yeah, but then you realize, wait a minute, I can't make a cartoon where my Bored Ape stars in it, which is such a fucking great idea, because I don't have the necessary copyright protections. And Andreessen Horowitz said, what if we had more copyright? What if our decentralized, weird, anarcho-capitalist vision of the internet had more copyright?
It's only decentralized in the form of like the boring authorities. The cool authorities like Andreessen Horowitz, they don't count.
So I guess how I want to get into this conversation about copyright is just to talk about what is copyright as a kind of social construct, more than just a legal thing.
What first I want to say is that, we definitely talk a bit about copyright when we talk about how these big businesses have captured creative labor markets, but we talk about a whole bunch of different legal structures as well. But in terms of copyright, it gets sold to us as being about two things, right? The first thing is, we need copyright in order to incentivize investments in knowledge and culture, right? We want to get the stuff made, and we want to ensure that it's available ongoing. right? And no one can argue with that. And, if you don't have, just the fact that the marginal, the first copy you make of a thing, like a book, it can be really, really expensive because someone's got to sit down for a couple of years and write it. And then you've got the editors and you've got all of this labor and it's expensive, okay? But the second copy can be virtually free, right? Especially if we're talking about, even a physical book might be $3 or $4 to print. But an ebook is an infinitesimal fraction of a cent, even to distribute it as well. So you need some kind of thing in order to stop people from just free riding on those investments. So all of that makes a lot of sense. But the other explanation we're given is a really interesting one. This is where the social stuff comes in, I think, is because we're also told that copyright is about recognizing and rewarding creators. Okay, so it's different to patents, right? They don't talk about that. They only talk about incentives when it comes to patents. But copyright is special. It's about this other thing as well. But we're being sold a bill of goods here, right? Because while it's about, even if it is about incentives and rewards, what we see is copyright structures that see businesses taking not just the minimum necessary to incentivize their investments and then kindly leaving the creators with their recognition and rewards. They take everything they can get, right? To the point that like a standard form Hollywood contract takes rights throughout the universe at large. So like even if a lucrative extraterrestrial market does emerge, it's still not going to be the creators who get rich, right? And so
people want Spencer Confidential 2 on Mars.
And so this is what's happening like a lot of the time in the copyright discourse. Something that really frustrates us is the lobbyists come out and like, we need more creators. We need more copyright because do you hate creators? That's why you don't want more copyright. But it's bullshit, right? Because it's like giving more copyright is like giving a school your kids being shaken down at the school gate for their lunch money, right? Do you solve that by giving them more lunch money? No, I mean, this doesn't really happen. I don't think in Australia we don't have lunch money in the same way. I think you send armed guards with them. Is like what's the normal solution?
The normal solution, speaking as the father of an American high school student, is that's right. It involves a handgun. But and to further that little analogy, if the bullies came out and said, "God, will no one think of the plight of the starving school children? We really need to give them more lunch money." It'd be pretty transparent that this is not what they're talking about. And the thing about copyright is it's not well understood. It's not well understood by creators. It's not well understood by their audiences. It's also not well understood by people who work in the industry, right? I've had so many. In fact, this morning I got an email from a guy who's a recovering screenwriter of with some accomplishments, who wrote a novel, and he says it's a great novel, but it's set in a Disney theme park, and he paid a lawyer for a legal opinion about whether or not it was fine. And the lawyer said it was fine because it was fair use, but he needs to get an insurer to insure it so that he can get a publisher. And I'm reading all of this, I'm like, this is like not even wrong, right? Like not only it's not fair use to set a story in a Disney theme park, because it's not a copyright issue to set a story in a Disney theme park any more than mentioning that your characters ate at a KFC is a copyright violation. Maybe there's this like very dim kind of trademark question that you could dispense with. But anyway, this guy paid 10 grand to a lawyer to like give him an opinion because, he correctly assumed that publishers and insurers would not want to publish the book because they were worried about it, even though this has like no point of contact with the actual laws it's written or even the jurisprudence. It's literally just a bunch of made up folk beliefs, which is an important part of how copyright works, is it's got this penumbra of incorrect assumptions, which is why you go to YouTube videos and underneath it says no copyright, which I think they think means I am not asserting a copyright, and provided I don't assert a copyright, I'm okay. And you saw this back to fucking crypto. You saw this with the Jodorowsky Dune book, where those people were like, we must buy the Jodorowsky Dune book in order to have the rights to make a movie from it. And then a whole bunch of other people were like, even if you buy the Jodorowsky Dune book, you can't make a movie from it without their permission. And the actual truth is like way more interesting, which is that there are a whole bunch of limitations to copyright that let you adapt whole creative works with all of their plot elements, their characters, and their dialogue without permission, like The Wind Done Gone, which is a book that tells the story of Gone with the Wind from the perspective of enslaved Africans, which the Margaret Mitchell estate sued over, and which the Supreme Court said no, even though it includes dialogue, all the set and setting, and and all the characters and the plot, it's still fair. And so like they're all wrong.
Well, it seems like it's more of use as a sort of an intimidation tactic as far as anything else. This idea that like Disney can send in infinity lawyers to make your life hell while you try and get your transformative work published.
Well, I mean, Disney has been doing this like over and over. Like the Disney Must Pay campaign that Cory's been really involved with around getting Alan Dean Foster paid. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but this is this wild legal theory that they came up with. They acquired, Lucasfilm and all of these other movie studios, and as part of that, they got the rights to a bunch of novelizations of, key sci-fi properties like Alien, Star Wars, whatever. And then they stopped paying the authors. And then the authors were asking for their money, and Disney comes back and is like, well, we've acquired the rights to your works, but not the liabilities, not the responsibilities. So sorry you're confused about that, but we don't have to pay you anymore. Right?
Yeah, we acquired the right to your house, but not the liability to pay you for it. Yeah. It's a remarkable thing. And, it's like in the same way, the first half of this book is, we try to make it lighthearted, but somewhat eye-watering dissection after dissection of how a bunch of different scams work. It's in the template of some of the things you guys do when you pick apart Baroque financial scams and so on. And a lot of the times when you get to the very root of it, like, how is it that they're able to do that specific fuckery? Like, what is the generally accepted accounting practice basis for example, assessing a breakage fee on royalties derived from digital sales, where a breakage fee is the percentage deducted from your royalties to account for the shellac records broken between the warehouse and the old-timey record store in the horse-drawn carriage? How are they taking breakage out of your MP3s? And the GAAP basis for that is, fuck you, that's why, right? And so much of the time, fuck you, that's why is the basis for all of these. And we try to get into some of the, in the second half of the book, we try to get into solutions that address fuck you, that's why. And I know every time I call it a solution, I'm worried Evgeny is going to show up and slap me. But
the other day he was talking about the final solution.
The last chapter. I was like, in the last chapter, there's this, we offer the final solution. I was like, oh shit, and it's Rosh Hashanah too. That's not good.
And then he started on the third way.
And I was like, can we offer a third way? It was just everything is bad.
Then he started pointing at something up in the corner of the room. It was a whole, very unfortunate.
Well, you see, the problem with those terms is that they're all copyrighted. So,
getting sued by some people in Argentina. I think actually you will find that.
So the second half of the book is like, it's devoted to like explaining how systemic interventions could address this, never individual ones. We actually had an editor say, "Oh, I can't publish this because none of the solutions are individually oriented. They're all systemic. Like, I just want to know how I should personally recycle so that climate change ends." And we had some bad news from him. But like one of them. So here's a fuckery and a solution.
Like Stalin.
If you have a royalty arrangement with your publisher, your studio, or label, you generally have the right to audit your royalty statements. And when you do, like either out of your own pocket or through a professional association, you'll often find discrepancies. We cited some research of a firm that does this for record labels. They've been doing it for decades. They've done tens of thousands of audits. And in all of those, this is going to baffle you, but in all of them, except one, the error was in the favor of the label and not the musician. And I know this is some incredibly localized probability storm resulted in this incredibly unlikely thing. But
it's weird how they got the same auditors as Wirecard and Greensill and NMC Healthcare.
Odd. Yeah. You go into the room where they do the royalties at Warner Brothers and they're just shaving a poodle.
This was actually the audit firm who had found in favor of the artist. So like they seemed to be like
they're the good guys,
decent people.
It's just the record label's own internal audits were being conducted by Lex Greensill. Ooh, 3 Lex Greensills in a trench coat.
Yeah, very tall.
So when you find the errors, and we'd like talk to one source who had a 6-figure error in their favor, right? When you find them and you say, you owe me this money, they're like, no, you're wrong. And you're going to have to sue us. And of course, that's very expensive. But then because they're good-natured slobs, they say, I tell you what, just to make things square between us, we will pay you, but you got to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We don't want everyone to get the wrong idea here, which means that if you find 6 figures, you can't tell the other people whose money they've stolen, hey, there's some money buried over there with your name on it, go dig it up. Now, all of these contracts, because of monopoly, are consummated in California, New York, and Washington State. And contract is a creature of state law. And so if we just amended state law with short bills that said, as a matter of public policy, non-disclosure is not enforceable when it relates to audits that reveal material errors in royalty statements, which is literally like a one-paragraph bill. You pass it in 3 states, suddenly millions of dollars fall out of this machine and directly onto artists of all kinds all around the world. More money than 40 years of copyright term extensions, which these same artist groups have fought for and spilled so much blood and treasure for. They could instead direct their attention to things that make material improvements instead of existing entirely in the realm of ideas, which is to say copyright term extension, which is just the right to be angry at people for doing things they were going to do anyway, as opposed to the right to have more groceries to feed your family.
And then while we're doing that as well, there's some other things we could throw in there, because like these contracts also like prohibit you, like really routinely prohibit you from using the same auditor that's already auditing that firm, like, you know, the person who knows where the bodies are buried, right? And also stops them from like looking at some of the information, which is where the bodies are buried, right?
It's like you can investigate everything about the murder scene except the body, the weapon, this blood spatter over. You can investigate what's in the kitchen cupboards. Maybe that's got a clue for you.
Into the detective who's searching my house. Like, could you just do me one favor, which is don't dig up that corner of the garden. That would be a real solid. Dig away the rest of it.
What I'd love to see though is like if these bills manage to like get to a sort of like state assemblies and senates, just like what kinds of justifications centrist Democrats and Republicans would come up with for opposing them. We can't ask pertinent questions. That would scare away investment.
Exactly. I've just thought of an example of MP3 breakage. Okay. Well, I wish to listen to a rendition of Nom Encore by Linkin Park and JC. Well, I found myself on LimeWire, and I found a perfectly comely looking copy of this here pop record, and it was labeled Linkin Park Nom Encore.exe. Now, to my surprise, when I downloaded this here phonograph, I found my computer had become quite unusable.
We need to provide a key for Gen Z to understand that joke.
I gotta say, I miss the other fictional kernel that Milo did to annoy me. But so
Colonel J.G. Acaster being sued by KFC for copyright.
Bringing it back in a little bit, right? Rebecca, you were talking about some of the other things that could be done by any kind of reasonable society.
Yeah, also transparency rights, like, you know, we started talking about that. That's a big one. And we're seeing in Europe with the Digital Single Market Directive, there was some really dumb shit in that, but there was also some good stuff, and that includes transparency rights. So all member states have got to give artists and performers new transparency rights over how their works are being used, what revenues are coming in, and how they get paid. But they've also got, you know, new rights to fair and proportionate remuneration for their work, which could serve as some kind of minimum wage for creative labor, if implemented well. And also use it or lose it rights. So if you've assigned your copyright, and the, you know, as is nearly always the case, the rights holder you've assigned it to loses interest after a short period and it's no longer available, then you can get those rights back and be able to exploit it. So these are ways that we can actually focus on those things that copyright, we're told copyright is about, that is about. If we do revert rights to authors in that kind of circumstance, yes, we help reward them, like, because they've got new ways of getting paid, but also we're facilitating access to knowledge and culture. So these are both the things that it's supposed to be about.
Because it seems right, like this thing of we talked actually, like initially the question was about copyright, but we've touched on so many of these different kinds of choke points, from like the extreme expense of bringing a claim in the legal system, the domination of say audits and information by these giant firms, and so on and so on. But I think the interesting thing about copyright, and the reason I ask about it specifically, and the reason I'm interested in it, is that so many of the things that allow it to be so easily abused are its technical elements and the way it is socially perceived. The way that it is socially perceived, as you said, Cory, you were giving the example of the guy who is terrified that Disney's going to jam lawyers up his ass because he like mentions the theme park in his novel, right? That's how it's socially perceived as this terrifying thing.
What is this, one man, one lawyer?
But also,
I can't gape.
At the same time, how because it is designed to be sort of so technical and finicky and all this stuff, it is something that actually is again, among many other solutions, sort of a problem that can be solved with these kinds of, again, as you say, technical legal changes, combined, of course, with things like collective action, which would be required to push for them anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I want to bring a kind of leftist perspective here.
On this show? No, I don't know.
And so there's this like ideological story about copyright that exists totally in the realm of ideas about, oh, it's an exclusive right and it's yours and it's your patrimony and you can hand it down and all of this other stuff. And whenever the industrial interests that exploit creative laborers are talking about copyright, they lean really hard into this stuff, right? They're like, yeah, we need more copyright, just like as a kind of axiom, because the more copyright you have, the more protection you will have for your integrity.
Stop someone from starting garbage future or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And all of this stuff that's supposed to help you. But then when copyright contours are proposed that produce material effects in the world that change the distributional outcomes of the revenues derived from creative labor, suddenly the studios and the labels and the publishers change sides. It's no longer about ideology. It becomes, they sort of scramble for, and often don't even try very hard to have an explanation for why it is that something that would protect your integrity or would protect your living or what have you shouldn't be allowed. So in the 1976 Copyright Act, they included, in the US, they included a thing called a termination right, which is the right after 35 years to say, I don't care what my contract said. I'm going to file some paperwork with the Copyright Office and get my copyright back. And so a lot of creators that started their careers don't have a lot of negotiating power. They sign bad deals. 35 years later, for that tiny minority of creators whose works are very commercially viable, a termination right is the right to bring it back and then resell it to someone else on better terms. Stephen King terminated his first half dozen novels, and Dean Koontz did, and the women who wrote the Babysitters Club,
of course, as well.
Yeah, the women who wrote the Babysitters Club, the women who wrote Sweet Valley High terminated all of those. So those are books that are still commercially viable. They didn't get a great deal on them when they first did them, and now they've got them. And the industry hates termination rights. Every time they're proposed, when it came up in Canada and Bryan Adams was out there stumping for it, the Canadian industry was just like, oh, this is some kind of weird communism. Like, don't you know about the sanctity of contract?
Yeah,
why should you be able to break a contract?
Of squatting on this this deal that we made with someone who was impoverished at the time,
And the thing is, the story that if I give you more years of copyright, or if I give you more scope of copyright, or if I create more statutory damages or lower evidentiary burdens, the story that will make you, the creator, rich is missing a middle piece. I know it's hacky to reference the Magic Underpants gnomes, but it's missing. It's step 2, right? Step 1, more copyright. Step 3, profit. What's the thing that happens in the middle? And when you produce a thing that has a causal relationship between material improvements in artists' lives and a policy, they're like, we just can't do that, right? All we can do is the nonsensical ideological thing, not the materially important causal thing.
And they do say it out loud sometimes. I found the transcripts from there's sort of this real cozy kind of closed room arrangements where they were hammering out the deal around termination rights. The original idea was it would be after 25 years and it would be automatic. And the white men in suits who got into this room smoking cigars, nearly all representing the big content industries. And then there was sort of this one guy who was representing the Authors Guild. And so, despite all this rhetoric where they were going on, outside about the importance of protecting, artists' rights, in the room, they're just like, oh, well, no, absolute, freedom of contract. You can't possibly interfere with freedom of contract. And the Authors Guild guy, Owen Karp, pointed out that, well, actually, at this exact moment that you're saying this, you're having this big fight with the booksellers and you want to mandate that they sell your books for a certain price, and you're lobbying really hard for that. And he said the most amazing thing. He's just like, each of us will object to certain interferences and support other interferences, depending on whether we're the owner of the ox who was gored or whether we want to gore someone else's ox. And that's exactly what's going on here.
Sometimes you're the ox, sometimes you're the guy doing the goring.
And I think this is
Hermann Göring.
Remember that's also copyrighted. But that's
you
why
get another copyright letter from Argentina. Another one.
And that's one of the reasons, right, where all the way at the beginning why I wanted to talk about some of that crypto NFT stuff, because ultimately, right, that philosophy of we just need more copyright, more transactions, and it's like transparently moronic to anyone with half a brain, right? That's ultimately the same approach that these large companies take, right? Which is we just need more, and the more you have, the freer you'll be somehow.
Yeah, and the freer the markets, the freer the people.
I just want to talk a little bit about what happens when these companies do get lots of copyrights, and music is a great example, right? So you've got these 3 record labels that now control almost 70% of the global recorded music industry, right? They own 3 music publishers that control almost 60% of the global recorded music, like song rights. Now, we don't need these companies in the same way that we used to, right? Because with the advent of digital technologies and the internet, we've got so many different options. And like the fact of that has meant that the contracts that are offered these days are actually, quite a lot better. But and they got these rights not just from investing in records, but also through buying up lots of other companies, often at high fire sale rates during that sort of Napster war crisis. But when they've got these rights, which they last for almost a century, they use those to control the future of the industry. So while we don't need these organizations in the same way, or musicians don't need them in the same way that they used to, they get stuck with these organizations shaping the future of music in ways that benefit them and not everybody else. And so, lots of us rail against the streaming industry because we understand that doesn't pay particularly well. One of the reasons for that is that it was shaped by the 3 major record labels in order to suit them best, right? And the incentives are completely balked, particularly at the time that they were doing this. They had everything arranged so that under the contracts, so first of all, they have to pay out remarkably little to their artists, especially on these older contracts. So because of the way the economics of the industry have changed, like we don't have to be making these really expensive shellac records and everything, royalty rates have been able to creep right up. So it's not uncommon now to get like a 25% royalty. But a lot of the backlist is being paid out on 4%, 6%, 10% royalties. And of that, nothing is actually getting paid out except on a balance sheet, right? There's just some money being moved around on a spreadsheet because of this scam called recoupment. So with record deals, not only do you maybe have a low royalty rate, but nearly all the costs of making the record get totted up to you, right? And so say it's cost $150,000 to, make your record, to pay the 4 bandmates for the year or so that they take off to write and record it, for some of the cost of touring, all of the cost of recording, right? It's going to take about $3 million in revenues, right, before they've paid off that notional debt that's being totted up to them and they ever actually get anything. And, the people we spoke to said maybe 5% of bands ever actually earn that out. And meanwhile, there are, coffers of gold going to the recording agencies. So it's sort of scam upon scam upon scam. And then you've got these other people who are sort of protecting their sinecures in terms of where the streaming money is going. You've got, in each country, you might have one or more collecting society, and they each maintain their own creaky database about which song the recording needs to be paid to who, and the song revenues need to be paid to who, which is enormously expensive, and there's massive amounts of, money being sucked up here in order to, protect those organizations. And then, meanwhile, in those contracts that, when Sony and Universal and Warner set up this streaming system, they had this unattributable money hustle where even though they had to pay out only the tiniest amount to artists anyway, they liked to make it sure they would never have to pay anything. And so they structured the deals so that they would maximize what's called unattributable revenue, which, maybe you got an advance and you made it really.
The hearing the phrase unattributable revenue has given me goosebumps.
Yeah. What if we put
Every
all of
time
this
it
on
rains,
the
it rains
blockchain?
pennies from heaven.
Sorry, please go on.
So you've got this unattributable money hustle that they had where they would, and record labels have done this for absolute decades, but they really started taking the piss with streaming. So there's structure that the contract said, well, if there's revenue that comes in, but it's not attributable to any use of any particular record, then it goes into this black box and the label just gets to keep it. They don't have to pay it out to anyone, right? And so, And then what they would do then is as a condition of like letting these companies like stream their works when they were starting out, they were just like, all right, so we're going to charge you an enormous advance that you're not possibly going to earn out, right? And then like a bit of a lower royalty rate, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Do you like that deal, streaming company? And this way we don't actually have to share any of the bus part.
So to make that clear, it's like a millionth of a cent to stream, but you owe us $1 million a month, which means that all the streams that you play add up to only a few $1,000s, and then the rest of that money comes in as unattributable.
Oh,
and so again,
I think I figured it out. It's that all of these companies are run by Wahhabists who are trying to eliminate all music.
I thought you were going to say all usury, but yes, all
doing
music
Islamic
too.
finance, yeah.
Again, it was transparency that like fixed this, because there was everyone sort of suspected it was going on, but commercial in confidence, you can't talk about what's actually happening.
It's like doctor-patient confidentiality, basically. It's similar to
The Verge got hold of a leaked contract between Sony and Spotify in about 2007 and showed what was going on. And there were like all kinds of unattributable revenues that were suddenly happened to be these big parts of the contract. And after this came out, then musicians were able to mobilize against the enemy and and do something about it. And like the majors did reluctantly change their practices around that. But it's just scam after scam after scam.
record companies coming in like, Listen, buddy, we own everything from the Big Bopper to Cliff Richard, and if you want to play our music, you do it our way.
It's doctor-patient confidentiality. The doctor is Harold Shipman, though.
So are you suggesting that if you tried to call the cops on Harold Shipman, they'd send you to jail for breaching doctor-patient confidentiality?
Unattributable pensioners. We don't know where they came from. We don't know where they went.
It's neither here nor there, but there was a big spread in one of the news sites today about all the states that exempt priests from mandatory reporting. And what that means is that it is actually a breach of their duty of confidentiality that when Kid Fiddler confesses and then they turn them into the police. That actually is against the rules.
Oh, fantastic. This also harks back to the episode that we did with Dan Beckner about Spotify back in the day, friend of the show.
Yeah, of course.
Where we also unearthed that the record labels own the streaming services.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
They sold off most of those holdings, but
Universal still got theirs, which is a huge money spinner. And they refused to, for years and years and years, to say whether they were actually going to share the proceeds of that, because that's unattributable, right, with their artists. I think they were really hoping the issue would go away. It didn't go away, but actually thanks to Taylor Swift, Taylor Swift did a good thing for creators. The two others, Warner and Sony, sort of, again, after years, they sort of reluctantly announced that they would share it, and they would do it in a dumb way. So Warner said, okay, we'll share it, but it's all going to get offset against your recoupment debts, right? Those imaginary amounts.
It's all going on your permanent record.
Yeah.
And so no one really got
just
anything.
for the violent femmes. It's only them where it goes down on their permanent record.
And Sony paid it out, didn't offset it against the illusory debts, but they paid it out at really low rates. And Universal's like, we're not going to say. But then when Taylor Swift signed to them, and she's actually got some bargaining power, as part of that deal, apparently she got them to also agree that they would pay it out on a non-recouped basis. So we don't know the royalties yet, but at least people are going to get some money in their pocket.
So one of the weird conflicts of the studios being shareholders in pre-IPO Spotify is that the less money they took out of the firm in the form of royalties, the greater its profits looked on its balance sheet when it went IPO, and the more those shares popped that they were holding. And so it's a weird kind of insider trading that they were doing, where they could control the cost basis of a firm that they were a shareholder in, and they could artificially improve it by agreeing to take less money so that then they could take money out of suckers who poured into the stock when it went public.
But then this also drove down the prices that other people could negotiate, because they had sort of most favored nation clauses as well. So when the independents who had, either no equity or a very tiny amount of equity in this, and when they went back to the negotiating table to do their own royalties, they found there was a new lower ceiling, because the majors had agreed to a lower price for theirs in order to drive up their shareholdings. Everyone else got lower rates too, but didn't have that offset.
I mean, basically,
rising tide lifted all boats.
What we're suggesting, more or less, is that a butterfly sort of cooks the books in the Amazon, and then no bands in Europe can have dinner. essentially.
Oh no, Amazon's a completely different story. We could spend another half hour on them.
Every big company is basically, when you get down to it, when you strip away all the layers of the onion, at the core of it, there are some guys shaving a poodle.
You said that in the last week's episode, and then I heard someone else talking about it.
No, it
wasn't a poodle.
Wasn't it a poodle?
It was like a Pomeranian.
Oh, was it?
These details matter.
Truther.
Well, I mean, shaving a Pomeranian would take much less time. It's a much smaller dog. Your overheads are lower.
But it's sort of funnier, though, as well. Like, you have just like a little hand razor.
That's right.
What I'm learning from this is that it's theft at both ends of the music industry, except it's the artists doing the cool kind of theft where you sample stuff, and then it's music producers and music companies doing the bad kind of theft where you steal from the artists.
When we do it, it's the progress of the useful arts. When you do it, it's piracy.
Exactly.
I mean, that's always been in the mix.
What transformative use is provided by Warner or Universal or whatever?
Well, they do a lot of reboots.
Yeah.
And we all thank them for that.
Can we talk about Amazon?
Sure. We got time.
Because I know it's my first time back in the States for a while. For some reason, I haven't been traveling much from Melbourne, Australia. For the last couple of years. But I was really shocked to be back in New York the other week and see just like every package being delivered now has got Prime tape on it. And probably, you're seeing the same thing in a lot of places. But this is like a really good way of understanding what's going on, because the Amazon play is what all of these companies are doing, right? And they talk about it. They love to boast about their flywheel. Do you want to talk about the flywheel?
Yeah, sure. They've got this idea that, we are able to bring in a bunch of suppliers and negotiate favorable terms, and then customers pour in to buy the things from those suppliers. That incentivizes suppliers to come in and to offer us even more favorable terms and so on. They call it, a virtuous cycle, but it's just as easily viewed as a vicious cycle, of course, because another way of putting it is we suppress wages of our suppliers and we suppress payouts of our suppliers. We use those artificially low prices initially that were subsidized from our shareholders, who allowed us to take a loss for many years, and then subsequently by forcing suppliers into unfavorable terms that are ultimately unsustainable. That also excludes new market entrants, because who the hell can afford to sell these products at lower than cost, because they don't have the street providing them with the money to subsidize it. So we then can acquire a monopoly. We can mobilize that monopoly to habituate our customers to using our service, to bind our service in with other things they do, like where they buy their groceries, to offer them Prime so that they're $150 in the hole at the start of every year, and they can only recoup that by only ordering from Amazon instead of shopping around. And then we can use the fact that those customers aren't and can't leave our silo to extract even better pricing from our suppliers. On the audiobook side, on the publishing side, that's pretty terrible. On the hard goods side, it's even worse, because one of the things Amazon then does is it's like, oh, hey, we figured out which of these products is selling really well. So we because you use fulfillment by Amazon, because that's the only way to get front page listing on an Amazon search, we get the waybills from your manufacturer, so we know who makes your product, and now they're making it for us instead of you, and we're selling that product now, and you can go pound sand. With creators, it's a similar kind of vicious cycle. It has some slightly different characteristics, and it has some specific technical wrinkles that are relevant to Trashfuture.
Does that mean that Amazon is going to start using AI to generate the erotic pamphlets that seem to comprise 90% of the Kindle marketplace?
Well, I mean, there's no good reason they shouldn't, right?
I think I heard that they already were.
That you can buy on Amazon.com. Yeah, I mean, so basically, Amazon is inviting you to play a game of Monopoly. They already have hotels on every property, and you are the shoe.
That's right.
Okay, fantastic.
So with tech, there's these technological wrinkles, right? So you can use DRM on digital products that you sell from Amazon, irrespective of which supplier they come from. So audiobooks is the one where it's mandatory. If they have Audible, Audible's 90% of the market. They won't let you sell on Audible unless you put their DRM on it. And thanks to Section 12.1 of the DMCA here in the US, Article 6 of the European Copyright Directive and its implementations in the UK and the EU and other laws around the world, it's against the law to remove the DRM. Even if the rights holder authorizes you to do that, which means that if I, as the seller, the person whose copyrighted works are being sold on Amazon, wants to get a better deal, Amazon has some spectacularly bad deals. There's a scandal called #AudibleGate that involves north of $100 million in wage theft from independent audiobook creators. If I want to get a bigger deal somewhere else and maybe not have my pocket picked, I have to bet that you are willing to jettison your whole Audible collection or maintain 2 separate silos for your audiobooks if you're going to follow me, right? And so that's not going to happen. And so my audience is now chained forever to Amazon's platform. So Amazon can extract more and more concessions from me and treat me in ways that are really unethical. And I just have to suck it up and take it.
Yeah, so that's what all these companies are doing. Like, that was what we realized was the common factor after we finished like looking at all of these different industries. We're like, well, the playbook is clearly you do everything you can to lock in your customers, right? And then you use that to lock in your suppliers, use the profits to like eliminate competition, whether it's by stopping new entrants from coming in or you know, like Amazon did once, spend $200 million in a single month to just wipe out a diaper company, right? Which might seem like an expensive way to corner.
Like a big Amazon loitering munition drone, you know, just coming in through the roof.
It might seem expensive, right, to like, you know, sell more nappies, but it's like really cheap as a signal to send people like, don't like stay off our turf.
But in that factory, when they saw the Amazon drone turn up, they were shitting their pants. Have I got news for you if you're listening to this?
Please carry on.
And then once you've done all of that, right, then you just get to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze your workers and suppliers until they're getting just a really unsustainable share.
At least Al Capone wasn't talking about going to fucking space. Like, at least
what
he
shape
was
would Al
content to
Capone's
like
rocket be?
Oh yeah, big sort of like Tommy gun, Chicago.
I was thinking Tommy gun.
Yeah.
No, I think you're all missing what shape it would be, which is one of those like late 1920s, early 1930s boxy cars, you know, that's that has the windows that you crank up and down. I think that's what he would have. But yeah,
you know, I was born in the 70s and we had windows that cranked up and down. I think
I don't know.
You children.
Look, I as a child, I think has the.
I clearly just have been.
You just
in,
like to
not
like
enough cars.
expose. Yeah, you like to expose your sort of little Lord Fauntleroy childhood and adolescence, where you're like.
Well, I was carried everywhere on a litter. There were only curtains.
Yeah.
I was in Ibiza in July, and I had to unlock a car for someone, and I just couldn't work out how to do it. And I came back, and I'm really sorry, I don't know, man. And they're just like, you put the key in the lock and you turn it.
That's how they get you.
I was like trying to find the bit to beep.
That's how they get you. They've locked you into them. But
it's all a conspiracy by big car keys.
we talk of Amazon and specifically of Audible. And of Audible is essentially, as you say, right, realizing that because it benefits from all these network effects, it is largely able to just write terms to people where they can say, do you want to be an author? Well, here's basically the contract to be an author. This desirable profession that a lot of people want, which basically means that we, as Amazon, can be responsible largely for like the increased proletarianization of most authors, and then this weird long tail of books that are written by people who don't really want to be authors, but just, again, use an AI to write relatively similar, like short, templatable stories.
The dinosaur that was gay, a short story.
Or in some cases, I've seen... I
talk about a weird long tail.
I saw this as like a pro-business tip on like LinkedIn at some point, where they were like, how to make money easily using like Amazon, like their sort of, as you mentioned, like the sort of like self-publishing service. And they were like, yeah, I signed I did like all the contracting stuff, and then I subcontracted my writing work to someone via Fiverr. So I got someone else to kind of like auto write this very bad book.
Grim.
And most of them are sort of like non-fiction businessy books and stuff, right? So it's like fairly simple to write. Most of it is just kind of like replications of things
using
that exist.
the word blockchain.
Yeah. Chapter 1, buy low. Chapter 2, sell high.
Yeah, it's like, 10 chapters and then, and then on the 11th one, you're sort of like...
Everything they teach you in Harvard Business School. Business secrets of the Sarah.
So this is very much like an established sort of part of the whole like self-publishing ecosystem, which like is sort of marketed as like, here's like a really quick way of making money.
Sure.
And it is kind of.
I'm going to write a 1,000 volume series on Amazon that's called "What Everything They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School." It's going to be like Chapter 1, Digging a Foxhole.
I mean, you've never been to Harvard Business School, clearly.
Yeah.
So what they were doing with that, one of the reasons you can actually make a little bit of money there is because Amazon changed the rules so that you could get up to 70% of the royalties. But the reason they did that is because you remember that quote from Bezos, who's told the team who was working on the Kindle to act as if you're putting everybody who's making physical books out of a job. Right. And what they were trying to do is get revenge against the publishers who were not willing to be who were trying to resist being shaken down at the time that those ebooks first came out. And so they're paying what is a relatively generous royalty in order to weaken the traditional publishing industry. But it's not that they're doing it and that's going to be sustained, once everybody is locked in. And we've seen that play out just a few days ago with the Twitch play. With Amazon.
So Amazon, owns Twitch, and Twitch is, Gen Z TV. And
it's home to some great YouTube stream.
Also, so the official Dirt, who has 20 trillion followers. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got this generous 50-50 split, right? Which is not generous at all. Holy shit, they take half your money. But it turns out that they had a secret deal with their A-listers where it was a 70-30 split. And then last week, the president of Twitch was like, oh, my conscience has got the best of me. I finally have to admit that we're secretly paying, the really popular people 70%. And to be fair to everyone, we're cutting their wages to a 50-50 split.
Ishmael, what are you complaining about?
And he kind of anticipates this reaction. She was like, you may be asking yourself, why don't we just pay them all? And it's just not sustainable. Our bandwidth bills are too high, except they buy their bandwidth from Amazon.
Huh. Me is charging me too much money.
Amazon is charging Amazon so much money to run its business via Amazon that it can't afford to pay its labor force.
Oh my God, yeah. This is Russian style of business. I briefly worked for a tutoring company in Moscow where I was taking them to task about the rates they were paying tutors versus the rates they were paying the clients. Which the rates for tutors were okay, but the fact they were charging the clients so much meant that the clients were being completely insane about what they expected from you in terms of their kids. And I was like, this is deranged. You have a no overhead business. You have a small office and then you have 3 guys who work there and they just go, you go teach that kid. This is not, you do not need this much money. And then eventually the guy who was managing the office just explained to it, he was like, look, you got to understand that the wife of the guy who owns the company takes a lot of money out of the business. And that's a big overhead for us. And I'm like, are you under the impression that is a legitimate business expense that I should be subsidizing?
Yeah, that's you. It's
he charges me a lot of money.
Yeah. You got to minimize externalities in business, except for that guy's wife.
That's so many things, right? The sort of wild Russian experience is just the thing stripped down to its essence.
Is it a crime to be a wife guy? And you answer me in this instance, yes. But I think in a higher and a more moral sense, above the sort of your petty tax code and things of that nature.
One of the things I sort of wanted to discuss before we end here, because I see we're sort of slightly coming to time as well, right? Because we've talked about a lot of the dissecting of what it is that they do. We've also talked about the ways in which people resist it, and we've mostly talked about this as again, rightly so, with the respect to the wages of the creators versus what is taken by capital, the middlemen, whatever you want to call it. But I think I just want.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, Bezos' wife takes a lot out of the business. But I want to end on how,
she does,
not just how this depresses the sort of lives of people doing this stuff, but also just how it frequently makes the art much worse as well. When so much of the effort is either sort of creating these complex systems that lend themselves to, when I say gaming, I don't mean gaming like as in Twitch, but gaming that system, and creating art that's not meant to be consumed, but that's meant to either tick several data boxes, or that's meant to be favorably sucked up in sort of the Audible algorithm.
Love to get favorably sucked up.
Or things such as this. So I just want to sort of pose that to you. How do you feel this has affected the actual product?
So I think that I am reluctant to make qualitative judgments about the art, at least that I experience. I want to start by saying that, like, I don't feel like I have a lack of great books to read or great TV to watch. There is some terrible TV and terrible books, but like I have a shelf there of books by people who have asked me to read them for reviews or blurbs, and each one of them is better than the last. That's the shelf that I kept. And it's like 4 years of reading.
And a whole other shelf of Unabomber manifestos, which actually improves with every read.
Manifestos. And so but I will say that, like, this is my little weird jargony bit, that COMO is InfoSec, that content moderation is information security. And so if you have a rule that says, like, we are going to promote X and downrank Y, that rule will be quickly found out by the people who want to spam or do bad things, or who are, churning out AI written books about Harvard Business School or whatever.
The enemy knows the system.
Yeah.
And all of this. And
then the people who aren't in this, who aren't gamers, right? Who are there to, like, just to make art. Those people, their vocation is not figuring out what the rules are. Their vocation is making the thing. And so oftentimes you either end up with these parasitic relationships where, in order to succeed, you have to hire someone else whose job it is to be the algorithm whisperer, or you have to be a spammer, right? And it's just much harder to gain purchase. The irony here is that the argument for these Baroque content moderation systems is that they are going to somehow resolve the problem of low quality, and they just contribute to it. And that's true, like, up and down the stack. Like, it's true when we're talking about anti-harassment algorithms. Like, the distinction between the thing that Facebook calls harassment and the thing that's almost the thing that Facebook calls harassment is indistinguishable if you are on the receiving end of it. But if you're like a fucking Facebook lawyer who spends every hour that God sends, masturbating furiously over the Turner Diaries and working out Facebook rules, then you can be a complete bastard to people on Facebook and never cross the line. And moreover, you can goad other people into crossing the line and then narc them out chapter and verse and say, I think you'll find that Facebook has a rule against that, and get them silenced. And I think that is like the overall problem of allowing all of our forums for culture and speech to be concentrated into a few hands that are run by mediocre donkeys, no better or worse than you or me, and then having like no public accountability and no competition. All right, they're better than you. I take it back.
That's right. I know I'm below a donkey. Damn it, Doctorow.
But we are seeing, we've had this 40, 50 years of increasing corporate concentration where all of these content companies are getting bigger, swallowing up the other ones, and they're all doing it in the name of efficiencies, right? And so they've got way fewer editors, you've got way fewer salespeople, and Penguin Random House might have just a couple people for selling the world rights for all of its books, right? In the New York office now. What they want to do then is they want to publish fewer books that sell more copies, right? And like in their universe, everyone will just buy 10 copies of the same one book every year, and like that will be like save all of the trouble for everyone.
Yeah, Unabomber manifesto.
The consequence of that, like as it trickles down, is like we see more and more homogeneity and like less risk taking. Over the top. I hadn't heard of it, but maybe if it had been really successful, even more over the top. The arm wrestling success story, and like what over the top
3,
again. Right. And what we're seeing, and like what we're gonna get, I think, it's not that people are gonna stop creating amazing stuff, although they may have less capacity to do so, particularly in countries that do not have any kind of social safety net and universal healthcare, because they die. But what we see is that there are fewer and fewer people able to actually devote their lives to creative labor in a professional way. So only the most commercial are going to be able to do that. And is that the world that we want to live in?
Mm. Well, lots of people are saying yes.
Well, if you weigh it by amount of money, lots of people are saying
exactly.
Yes.
If you're doing old school,
there's a Hollywood executive right now in the hills just up the road, working out this arm wrestling thing. Sounds like it's really got.
I'm just loving the idea that soon, Cory could have written the next great, sci-fi tale with a political message, and someone's like, Cory, we love the book. Have you considered calling it "Stepfather, I'm Stuck in the Dryer"? It's really gonna help with the sales.
Lathe of Heaven 2,
Stepfather, I'm stuck in the lathe.
Someone imagined that in their dreams that I was stuck in the dryer, and now it's happening.
It's like a very bad Photoshop like cover of like a shirtless guy on like a beach, holding a holding a washing machine.
Yeah.
You joke about all of this. If you want to read something completely batshit, Sarah Jiang wrote an incredible piece about something called Cockygate, which was
oh my God.
a conspiracy of Kindle Unlimited supernatural romance and romance authors who would get together and pick a hashtag that they would try and push. And then they would all write novellas about her, short stories that sold on Kindle as 99-cent novels and were in the KUP program and could make a lot of money. So they would like do these coordinated runs, it's like trying to goose Twitter trending topics. And they would just pick a word like werewolves having sex with, I don't know, like were-porcupines or something. And they would all write it, and they would they'd make it a mini trend. But one of them created a series of romance novels about these brothers called the Cocky Brothers, and
just guys who love mastic.
And she trademarked the word cocky in connection with romance novels. And then went after her co-conspirators, but it turned out it was because she was having a good run with this Cocky Brother thing, and then they tried to make it the group hashtag, and she was like, no, I don't want that to be the group hashtag, that's my thing. And so this was her revenge, and she brought in the USPTO as kind of her like, you and whose army, which then sparked all of these other batshit trademark claims. So there was a guy outside of Austin who's a self-published fantasy writer who trademarked any fantasy novel cover with a guy holding a sword on the cover. And so I saw this trademark application land, and I filed an objection, but then I got on with the General Counsel Macmillan, who published me, and they filed an objection, so his trademark didn't issue. But this stuff begets the weirdest. I mean, artists are weird and crazy anyways. Writers are weird and crazy. We just had our event in LA, and our interlocutor was David Goodman, who ran the writer's strike against the Big Four talent agencies, which is this kind of pit of private equity-owned monopolists who were screwing their clients. And he said, in order to win, we were going to have to all fire our agents. And they thought there was no way that we were going to do that. But they weren't banking on one important factor, which is that writers are crazy. And so we all fired our agents, right? We're crazy enough without adding in all of this other stuff of just like, it's like being in the behaviorism box where someone just reaches out and prods you with a cattle prod at random intervals to see what you'll go off and do. And that's what it's like to be, a creator inside the algorithmic prison. It's gross. I mean,
personally,
the
I
YouTubers know
love the
about
algorithmic
this.
prison. I love to press the little button, and I love to receive a little treat dispensed from the thing, the box.
I noticed that we're slightly coming to time here, so I just want to say, number one, Cory and Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with us today. It was a delight. I always know it was a good conversation when I'm like, wow, I made so many notes and used 5% of them.
We didn't even get into all that over the top 3 stuff, the musical.
I didn't even get to do my pitch for over the top 3.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman singing the title number, Man at Arms. Yeah.
And I think what we've all learned here today is that the only way is that it's only through collective action, through careful litigation and legal transformation and real political engagement that we will get the Master and Commander cinematic universe made.
The MCCU.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So once again, Rebecca and Cory, thank you so much for coming on. The book is called Chokepoint Capitalism. Where can people find it?
Well, it comes out in the UK on
November 15, and Australia there, and New Zealand.
By which time the price will be
it's out
beep. Yeah,
right. It's out in the US now, and in Canada. It's called Chokepoint Capitalism, and you can get it everywhere books are sold. However, you can't get the audiobook on Audible. The only chapter that you can get on Audible is the chapter that explains how Audible steals from authors. That is an Audible exclusive that we put up on Audible. There's also a Spotify exclusive that explains how Spotify's funny accounting works. That is the only part of the audiobook you can get on Spotify.
Amazing. Yeah, wonderful. And it's a very clever titling because choking's very big right now. So I think algorithmically speaking.
That's right.
What was the interview I was in? Was it yesterday? And I said they sort of choked that one out, and I was like, oh no. Gonna workshop this a little further.
Yeah, that is our struggle to find the final
I'm afraid
solution.
that's copyrighted too. I'm so sorry. Anyway, thank you so so much for listening as well, our listeners. There is a Patreon. It is $5 a month. You can listen to more of this. If you want
some number of pounds.
If you want, there's going to be a lot more of the talking about the generalized state failure of Britain in this upcoming bonus episode. We also have a live show. There are still tickets for it? Milo?
Yeah, 18th of October. There are still tickets. Buy tickets to that. Come to the live show. If you're a $10 subscriber, you get a discount. The discount code is on the Patreon. Text for $10. Go through your emails. Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere. And then, of course, if you are in Australia, we still have tickets for Sydney and...
Hot Britain. Are you there?
We still have tickets for Sydney, Canberra, and Brisbane.
Yeah, Brisbane. Yeah, Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne. There will be a Britanology live show also on the 19th of November. The tickets are not yet on sale. They may be on sale by the time this goes out. So look for those.
Look for those, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
can I put in a Britanology request?
Oh, yeah,
please.
I want an Adrian Mole episode.
Oh, that has been mooted. It's in our list of potential topics. Unfortunately, it's not something I know anything about. And Nate obviously doesn't know anything about it, so we might need a ringer for that one.
You have to get Adrian Mole.
We're gonna have to get Adrian Mole. Yeah.
Anyway. So once again, a thank you to our guests, a thank you to our listeners, a thank you to our patrons, and for all those of you who are going to come see us in London and then Australia.
Oh, also come see me.
Oh, right, there's Milo.
London, 12th of October, London sold the fuck out. You're too late. If you don't have tickets now, you're not gonna. Cambridge, 25th of October, many tickets available. Come to that.
From London,
From
perhaps.
London. Get the train. Those work.
It's reasonable.
Why not?
Well, wait, they don't really work that well.
No, not really. No.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We need to let ourselves and our guests go. So we're going to see you on the bonus episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.